Hi, this is Kevin Phillips. In this video, what I want to do is run through a process of how I achieved this particular render here, this old World War II style film footage. I click in here and I scrub through. We've got this nice kind of old World War II looking piece of film. And I did this to show off this 3D model, this 3D aircraft model, so I could have something nice to put on a showreel. Okay, so what I had to do with my 3D models, I had to kind of just what I call crapify it down. That means taking the object and making it look worse so it fits in with a really bad low quality World War II photographic background that I have here. So let's have a look at the process. The first thing obviously is I need to animate it. And in layout here, I've got the aircraft coming down and I've animated it so it's not perfect. So there's a little bit of heading shuffle left and right, and when it hits the ground, one wheel hits first and it kind of bounces up like that and then lands on both. So that's the first important thing, is to make sure the animation looks at least kind of semi-believable. Okay, so it doesn't just come in and just kind of land and drive along the ground. It has to have that kind of human factor. Okay, the other thing I had to do was just get this camera moving a little so it wasn't like a static backdrop. And to achieve that, as you'll notice at the ground and the photograph kind of appear to move in 3D space, I front projected a digital photo that I found online, a World War II photo, this one here in particular, onto the geometry and baked it in as texture maps. Okay, and that meant that I've got the ground here and I've got a sky sphere here, and as the camera moves around it makes the photograph appear three-dimensional. Okay, there is a limit you can go to before you break the illusion, because we don't have more stuff out each side of the photograph, and you can see it here. There's the edge of the photo, and there's also the edge of the photo here. But we didn't need a lot of movement. It's really just kind of like a cameraman standing there filming an aircraft coming into land. So what I did was I took this and I rendered out each part separate. So I rendered out the aircraft on its own, I rendered out the background on its own, and I rendered a few other passes for ground, like a ground shadow and some dust coming off the wheels when it hits the ground. Now to get the look I'm after, and I'll show you why this doesn't work out of the renderer, I needed to just fudge up, or like I said, crapify the nice crisp 3D aircraft. The best place to do that is in post, which means through Digital Fusion or Nuke or After Effects, some kind of compositing application. So let's have a look. For me, I use Digital Fusion, or in this case DFX4. DFX4 came bundled with Lightwave 8 as one of the upgrade options, or upgrade perks I should say, and for me it's still a great application. It's old, it's a little pricey to upgrade, but it works fine. It's pretty good for what it does. So here we go, I've got my render that I've loaded in, and what I did to make it kind of match was I said, well, the first thing that doesn't work here is that it's not as blotchy as the background. So the easiest way to muck that up, or crapify it as I'll call it, is to scale the picture down, which means kind of like in Photoshop, you resize the picture like so. And what that'll do is it'll just obliterate a lot of the image detail. It kind of half sizes it. You lose a lot of pixels. So I took that, I said, well, it's now too small, so I have to resize it back to the original plate size. So I ran a resize over that, and of course it brought it out, and you can see, we've lost a lot of our pixels in here, but it looks pretty crappy, much like the background. Now it doesn't match this kind of splotchy look of the background, so the next thing to do with that was just to run a blur across it, just to soften that up, and that looks a little closer. Okay, the problem with this has got this nice grey color that was on the original textures, but the background has this kind of a cyan, yellowish, greenish, sepia tone thing going on. So what I did was I color graded that aircraft. Let's just bring this up, and let's give that kind of greenish hue. And I did that by just cranking up the or the cyans and the yellows, I should say, to match that background a little bit better. Okay, so that was pretty good. That got it kind of partially there. Got it so it matched that background footage. So I said, okay, that's fine. That's one detail out of the way. But I need the small details. I need ground shadows. And if I drag this up, I need very subtle ground shadow. So I did this by rendering out an occlusion pass. So basically it became like a white image, and I can have a look at that here, with a black shadow on it. And the reason for that, rather than a nice shadow from a light, is that it's an overcast day, so you're not going to get any directional shadows. So just a soft shadow like that is perfect for what I need for that type of weather. Okay, but of course it's a bit grainy, a bit pixely, so I ran a bit of a blur over it before I then composite it straight back onto my footage. Okay, and one of the things that is really nice with compositing is the fact if it's not dark enough, I can just animate or adjust it, getting kind of lighter or darker with the blend control. Now you notice this is animated by the blue color of the channel information. The reason for that is because I wanted the shadow to kind of fade in as the aircraft got closer, because there was a subtle amount of shadow, and the problem is if you start having it appear too soon, it starts to kind of look a little bit odd. So it gives me a little control just to kind of fade that shadow on as it gets closer, and fade it off if I want to. Now I probably didn't really need to do that, but it gives me a little more control that way. Okay, so after we had the shadows on, that was great. I decided, well, when you hit the ground, you're not going to just stop and kind of drive along the hard ground. You might do if it's really impacted dirt, but there's always going to be a little bit of dust. And what I did was I rendered out a particle sequence to create that. Okay, if I was to turn off a node, let's have a look. Okay, and I then blended that in using a screen mode, so it kind of appeared on the ground like so. And of course if it looks that crisp, it doesn't match that blotchy look of the background, so I added a blur onto it just to soften that out, and also controlled the blending just to get it to be subtle enough, because it looks quite hard, the ground. You don't want it too intense, so I just kind of toned that back a bit. Okay, so after that I thought, well, that's nice, that looks pretty good, but I wanted to get them kind of integrated together a little bit better. So to do that, I just applied an overall soften to the whole lot, another blur, just to soften the blend between them. And it's kind of similar to how you can kind of integrate your CG a little better into photographs if you add a tiny bit of grain to it. And that's exactly what I did later on. But the next step was to kind of age it a little further. And to do that, and I added a fractal. Okay, so it's like a fractal noise thing, and I used that as a control to adjust the hue of the footage, so it kind of adds some imperfections to it. So if I turn that off, it's a very subtle imperfection, makes it kind of browner, but it's nice just to help break that up a bit more. Okay, I then fed that into a vignette, just give that old style look, blended that in. Okay, and just to add a little bit more kind of authenticity to it, I ran a film grain across it just to break it up. I wanted to kind of also add a little bit of a contrast hit just to give it that kind of bleach bypass kind of appeal. And finally, because it's now become quite dark, I ran a color adjustment to just bring up the gamma on that, or adjust the gamma to lighten it up, tweak a little with the contrast and brightness, you know, just to get that final look right. Okay, and we can adjust that. Now if I was to animate this gamma, I could give that nice kind of World War II old film kind of shimmer. Okay, at the moment I've just left it as is, but having that ability is pretty nice, and this is why you probably want to consider rendering things out as passes and compositing them rather than trying to do it all within your 3D package. It gave me a lot of control to get the look I wanted. So there is my process that I used to achieve that look. You should be able to achieve this in any compositing package, whether it's After Effects, whether it's Nuke, whether it's Digital Fusion or DFX like this one. So hopefully that's been of interest, and hopefully it's given you some ideas perhaps for your own little retro projects. And if anyone's interested in some of the things I've done here, wants me to extrapolate out on those, maybe into little mini tutorials, let me know in the comments, and I'll talk to you next time.